Hey again, guys. All right, so here we go. Hopefully, the last of the videos. All right, so your pancreas. Like I mentioned earlier, the learning outcomes throughout the PowerPoint are important. But I also mentioned earlier that it has both exocrine. No, frackin', reckin', schnurkin', reckin'. We'll try blue. All right, okay. Panugins. Okay. It has both exocrine and endocrine cells. Right? It's mostly going to be retroperitoneal, so behind the peritoneal. Yeah. You can also read that as beyond the peritoneal if you like. Okay. So it is a very large gland. It has its location is going to be just below the loop, underneath the stomach, and to the side of the small intestine, which there's not a great diagram of in this book or PowerPoint. So I would say if you're still confused about where it lies, it's mostly inaccessible if you're trying to palpate it. It's behind a bunch of tissues and stuff behind, kind of in the upper abdomen. And should have started my timer. All right. So, but it's kind of hard to palpate, like I was saying. And anyways, all right. So if this is the tail over here, then this is the head of the pancreas over here, right there. Oh, that line's not supposed to be there. Okay. This duct is going to be where the pancreatic fluid comes out. There is a common bile duct that is shared with the inferior pancreatic duct here. So sorry, I have allergies. What else I want to say? And then the duodenum or duodenum, I say duodenum, but whatever. This is just showing you your small intestine where it's tucked up in, or it's above this, but this guy was just talking about it being inferior to your stomach, which is not shown here. Again, not the most amazing diagram, but we'll work with it. All right. The exocrine functions for pancreas. It is a cluster of the glands. Okay. And they're called pancreatic acini, as well as being attached to their ducts. They take up 99% of the volume for the pancreas. The gland and duct cells themselves secrete a basic or alkaline fluid that's rich in enzymes, and then it's going to pass through a bunch of or network of ducts to the lumen and the digestive tract. So this would be where we get our insulin from, and we're not going to get into the islet Langerhans cells, but that's where the immune system actually attacks them for insulin type 1 diabetics or insulin dependent diabetics. Okay. So you've got alpha cells, beta cells, and delta cells. And if you guys don't already know the little Latin, the Greek alphabet, make sure you are aware of these so that you get them right. Oh, see, I did include it. Islets of Langerhans. They're just now calling them pancreatic islet cells. But so the alpha cells, I remember this as the alpha cells having an A and producing glucagon. The beta cells produce insulin. And I think I came up with something like B in, oh my gosh, B in like for insulin. And then the delta cells, they have a peptide hormone that's identical to the growth hormone that's growth hormone inhibiting hormone. All right, so we also have the PP cells. That's funny. The pancreatic polypeptide cells, which are aptly named, and they create the pancreatic polypeptides. My cat is at it again. Sorry. I even fed him. All right. So the pancreatic acini, the clusters for your exocrine cells are up here. The islets of Langerhans cells, they did a nice demarcation on here, but if you're looking at a regular old slide under a microscope, that's not going to be there. So sometimes the islet cells are a little bit harder to see. What you're going to want to look for is where the capillaries come in. So if you notice, here's a capillary, here's a capillary, here's a capillary that kind of surrounds them. But yeah, so because these guys need to be able to dump insulin into the blood after a meal. And to do that, they have to have access to capillaries. Right. So as glucose levels increase, so you just ate, your beta cells are going to secrete insulin. So the B cells, B in cells, are going to stimulate the transport of glucose into your target cells. When you have lowered blood sugar or blood glucose, the alpha cells are going to secrete glucagon. And again, I did the A and the A here. So this stimulates the glycogen breakdown and glucose released by the liver. Okay, so here we'll look at homeostasis again. So you've got normal blood sugar, 70 to 110 milligrams per deciliter. Those are typical ranges. Again, you're going to want to know them if you're moving on for nursing. You're going to want to know those ranges. And so, say your blood glucose level is increasing, you just had a big, like a bunch of sugary foods, like a movie theater snacks and a soda or something like that. So it disrupts the homeostasis. Again, your pancreatic beta cells are going to secrete insulin, so be in, and then it's going to impact all your body cells. Okay. And the way that it does that is a bunch of different ways, but increases the rate the glucose transport gets taken into target cells, increases the rate glucose uses and makes ATP, increases conversion from glucose to glycogen for storing it. So it's not immediately being used. What's not being immediately used is being stored. And then it increases the absorption of amino acids for protein synthesis, as well as increasing adipose tissue synthesis. So then you've restored it. Oops. Well, I don't know why that's there, but okay. So I think that's covered. All right. All right. So here we have again our normal blood sugar, right? So the stimulus is your alpha cells. I'm sorry. Your homeostasis gets disturbed because your blood sugar dropped. Maybe you had to sprint to catch a bus. Maybe you're hypoglycemic and you had something sugary and it immediately dropped your blood sugar. So again, your alpha cells in the pancreas, your pancreatic islet cells, secrete the almost said Alka-Seltzer. The alpha cells secrete glucagon, right? The liver, skeletal muscle, and adipose tissue or cells are going to respond different ways, but we'll see our liver and skeletal muscles increase the breakdown of glycogen to glucose so that your brain can still function. Just a side note, how ugly that's supposed to be a star. Oh my gosh, does not like my stars. Okay, your brain can only run on glucose. Oh my gosh. I hate this stupid. I want to throw it into the wall. Can only be run by glucose. Okay, and then you have an increased breakdown of fat into the fatty acids. So we're going basically the other direction than we just went. And then we increase the release of glucose in the liver specifically. Once we've done all this, we've increased our blood glucose levels back to where they should be, and homeostasis has been restored. All right, insulin. Just a reminder, it is a peptide hormone. That would be a good thing to know. It is released by the beta cells. Again, B in. So beta cells, insulin. All right. It does all what we just talked about. I'm not going to reiterate that. By all means, if you need to make a flashcard, make a flashcard. All right, glucagon again. These guys really. This is released by the alpha cells, what were previously known as pancreatic islet of Langerhans cells. Still a peptide hormone, just like insulin. Helps to get energy reserves working and mobilized to their target cells. Stimulates breakdown. I'm not going to read all this, but skeletal muscle breakdown glycogen. So does the triglycerides and adipocytes we mentioned, and the gluconeogenesis, so production and release of glucose in liver cells. Hyperglycemia. This is actually the opposite. So if you guys ever run into hypo, oh my gosh, hypo is lower. Wow, that's ugly. Hyper is higher. Okay, so hypoglycemia as I'm sorry, hypoglycemia is lower sugar. Hyperglycemia is higher sugar. So if you hear somebody is hyperactive, that means they have higher than normal energy and activity. Right? If they have hyperglycemia, they have higher than normal glucose levels, which you got to be careful because it can cause a lot of damage if you come out of this range. Whether it's too low or too high, you can cause a lot of damage. All right, so diabetes mellitus. All right, it's generally characterized by high glucose that overwhelm the ability of the kidneys to reabsorb. Okay, it does appear in urine. A gross side note is when they first discovered this. Urine is fine. When they first discovered this, pharmacists, they weren't called pharmacists back then, but uh, pharmacists were actually tasting the urine and they could see that it tasted sweet, and they called it the sugar wasting, I think is what they called it, based on what sense you were in. But polyuria, which is urine, excessive urine volume, is also a thing that characterizes diabetes mellitus. All right, so type 1 here and type 2, and there's actually type 3 and whatever, there's some more, but this one is usually discovered in childhood. And again, it's you are not making enough insulin by the beta cells. You have to get daily injections, or if you have really awesome healthcare, you can get an insulin pump. All right, so this is about 5% of the cases. And again, it's usually seen in children and young adults. It's not reversible once the immune system has started to attack those pancreatic cells. Type 2 is the most common form in the United States. It's usually because we're producing way too much insulin. I'm sorry, we're producing normal amounts of insulin, at least at first, but they don't respond. We are seeing insulin resistance based on those receptors I tried to draw for you earlier at the very beginning. So if this is my insulin receptor right here, and this is a normal person, then my person with insulin resistance, their receptor looks like that, and they're not able to take in the insulin. And this is not a scale. That's supposed to be the cell receptor, but this is mutated. This is why I say we have more than two types, but it is generally associated with obesity, though that can be incorrect. I have known people who personally known people who have been diagnosed with non-obese type 2 diabetes, um, and instead of controlling their weight or trying to lose weight, they're actually told to gain weight, but to watch their sugar intake, make sure that they're good and healthy, complex carbs, not high fructose corn syrup and simple sugars. But if it is associated with obesity, weight loss can be effective. But still, you have to watch your diet. You have to make sure that the sugars you're taking in are good and complex sugars, not cheapies. All right. Okay. When we see complications with the pancreas, it's generally from diabetes that wasn't managed was managed very poorly, you end up with kidney degeneration, and that is not fixable. Once that damage is done, it's done. You can end up with retinal damage. It's called diabetic retinopathy. Um, and this is just referring to the pain in your eyes from your retinal nerves. It can very well lead to blindness. Um, Definitely in the United States, you're 3 to 5 times more likely to have a heart attack. And then there's peripheral nerve problems. So, diabetic neuropathies. Okay, so and these would be in your legs or your hands, could be even your shoulders and your hips. But you will eventually see the tissue at the periphery start to die if it's not treated because the blood flow is so poor. So the tissue does just die if it doesn't ulcerate and become infected. You're lucky, but they'll lose feet and hands over this because if you can't debride it, you have to amputate it. All right, so secondary endocrine functions. And this is where we're talking about secondary systems like reproductive that come about as you get farther and farther away from the hypothalamus itself and the anterior and posterior pituitary. So these are all here, and you'll see we're going to see this system doesn't go away, guys. So the digestive system, urinary, cardiovascular, pulmonary, and the lungs should be in there too. Lymphatic for the thymus, and then reproductive for the gonads. So it impacts a lot. And then you've got intestinal, which obviously coordinates digestive capabilities. Excuse me. All right, so kidneys, again, they're going to release calcitriol and EPO, which is erythropoietin, which we'll see that pop up again later with white blood cells. Oh, no, sorry, red blood cells. Erythro, my bad. All right, so then the enzyme renin converts to angiotensinogen and angiotensin 1. In the lungs, that'll be further converted into angiotensin 2. But you need to know that from the kidneys, it gets all the way, enzyme converts it all the way over to have its own functions in the lungs. All right, so functions of your kidneys. We're taking in sunlight through the epidermis. You've got the appropriate amount of cholesterol and cholesterol in your diet. They go to the liver. You're adding dietary cholesterol. It has an intermediate form. Do not freak out about the name. All right. Then we see in the kidneys, you've got the calcitriol, right? But there's also the parathyroid hormone popping in here in the kidneys, and it doesn't bounce. It goes in between the kidneys as well as the digestive tract. But so this is just sunlight. So when people say get enough sunlight, that means that when you consume vitamin D, vitamin D, and E. coli breaks it down in your digestive tract, you're going to get calcium to strengthen your bones. So you have to have sunlight, the appropriate amount of nutrients and bacteria in your gut to build your bones. All right, so endocrine functions. All right, so we'll start off with the disturbed side. So homeostasis gets disrupted, your blood pressure itself and the volume go down. Okay, so say you had an injury, an external, or it's just an injury, you're bleeding profusely, or you donated blood. All right, so you decrease the renal flow to your kidneys and oxygen. Your kidney notices it and it says, hey, let me respond by releasing some erythropoietin so I can make some red blood cells. That's going to go again with your red blood cells, get them produced. That will increase the blood pressure. But it doesn't happen immediately, guys. If something doesn't step in and fix it, and that something is going to be angiotensinogen, angiotensin 1, and an enzyme you don't have to worry about, angiotensin 2. This will get you thirsty, which will also pull up your blood volume. You start secreting something that stops you from urinating, aldosterone, which we talked about earlier. We'll see again. And then that increases your fluid intake and again increases your blood pressure and volume to restore homeostasis. So if you get thirsty and it's a hot day and you're sweating a lot, don't drink something with caffeine in it because that's a diuretic that will make you urinate even more. Don't drink something with a bunch of sugar in it. Drink a Gatorade, drink a water with a little bit of lemon juice, just a little bit of lemon juice in it. But a little bit of salts and get your blood pressure back up, and your blood volume back up because you can very quickly go into heat stroke in Florida. All right. Oh, I don't think I'm going to get here, but we'll try. All right. Continuing these. Sorry, I meant to get rid of all these numbered ones. They annoy me. All right, the heart. So we've got natriuretic peptides AMP and BNP. This is when your blood volume becomes excessive. An action that is opposite to those of angiotensin 2. So it ends up in reduction of blood volume and blood pressure. That should be bolded. I don't know why it's not. Sorry. All right, so the thymus can produce thymosin. It has several hormones. You don't need to know all of them, but these guys will help help develop immature lymphocytes into mature ones that are usable by your body. And we will see the lymphocytes again in the immune system and blood. All right, sorry about that. All right, testes. Again, these are going to have interstitial. Oh no, I broke it. Interstitial endocrine cells, again, producing androgens. But you also get androgens from your adrenal glands. So just because you don't have testes doesn't mean you have androgens. All right. So the nurse cells, which I'm going to try to stick to this name because I don't like the other one. It's again, I want them to be like appropriate to what they're doing. These guys are going to help differentiate and physically mature sperm once biological males reach puberty. They complete puberty and reach adolescence. All right, and also will secrete inhibin, which we'll get to in reproduction, but you'll have seen it before. All right, so the ovaries produce estrogens. There's other places in the body that you get estrogen from. So like fat cells, for example. And this is where the main estrogen is estradiol. Okay. And this is the one that gets converted to testosterone. Almost made it with all those weird things. But testosterone. So, and women need this again for bone mass and musculature, as well as libido, and just like men need estrogen for growing. So after ovulation, the follicle cells, they will reorganize into what's called the corpus luteum, releasing estrogen and progesterones. And we're going to get into all of this when we get into the reproductive system and development. Well, reproductive system, really. But you guys are going to see this again. So don't freak out right now. Good things to start with, but we're going to go into more and more details as we progress with the course. All right, adipose tissue. Let's go. Releases leptin, again, a peptide hormone. Not again, it is a peptide hormone. Whatever. This is supposed to give you a regular feedback control for your appetite. Not everybody produces this, which can really lead to overeating. And then this should also maintain regular. So if you're overweight, this is one of the fertility reasons or fertility issues that can appear in women. But it's sorry, my phone is distracting me. I hate you, phone. Go away. It's because it impacts gonadotropin releasing hormones, which impact gonadotropin synthesis. So sometimes whether there's too little adipose or too much adipose, it can impact sterility or fertility. All right. So I'm going to stop here, and I will see you in the next video, and hopefully they'll both be shorter.